let's get to our 2-point conversation today, and I'll start things off with playoff caliber quarterbacks, some of whom proving themselves, passing early tests, some of whom were very good but haven't been tested, will get tested coming up, and some of whom I still have major questions about. And this is what collecting data is all about. So for me, listen, I personally have Florida State and Penn State making the playoff in large part because I believe in the two quarterbacks. I think it's hard to argue that Jordan Travis wasn't the number one performer. Yes, that includes everybody from Colorado. Jordan Travis, to me, if you are doing a week one Heisman ballot, which I think is a little silly, but I think Jordan Travis's performance with the efficiency numbers, the big play numbers, as we said, LSU's defensive backs were the concern. Jordan Travis went down the field, 2-star receivers, and made plays the entire game. He made plays with his legs. Huge second half. I think he passed every single test with flying colors against, the reigning SEC West champions in a dominant Sunday night performance. And I thought Drew Allar at Penn State, that dude looked every bit the part of what I think I could have hoped to have seen. Is West Virginia the level of, competition that we expect to be from like an elite championship caliber competition? Of course not. But 72% completion percentage, over 11 yards per attempt, no turnovers, over a 200 quarterback rating, over 300 yards. Frankly, the score could have actually been worse. I know they kind of got the cover late, but they missed a bunch of field goals. He was making cross hash throw, like he's making opposite hash throws on these out routes, making him look easy. He showed me sort of everything I needed to see in that moment. He's going to have much bigger tests coming up, but those are the two that really, really stood out to me. JJ McCarthy was incredibly efficient for Michigan. I thought that was a nice step to see, even though, again, a blowout. Same thing with Jalen Milroe, very productive, very efficient for Alabama, but again, in a very big blowout. Which leads us, of course, to the quarterbacks that did not pass the test. Cade Klubnik at Clemson. I'm not sure what you make of Kyle McCord at Ohio State. And then Quinn Ewers. I don't know what you make of those guys. Obviously, Klubnik did not pass, but some of that was just very random red zone mistakes. So I thought there was some playoff caliber quarterbacks trying to prove themselves, and a handful of them did exactly what I wanted to see, and a handful of them did not. And a few still have a lot of work to do.
I agree with you on Drew Allar. I was really impressed Saturday night. Now, West Virginia, like you said, the secondary for West Virginia is not very good, but still, I think seeing him in his first start combined with the new receivers that Penn State's trying to break in, it was a really impressive performance. And I think watching that after Ohio State struggled against Indiana, I don't want to overreact to one game here, but those two data points were interesting to me. You mentioned Kyle McCord. I think a lot of what's going on at Ohio State right now just starts up front with the offensive line. We knew it was a concern coming into the season. Didn't play well on Saturday against Indiana. We'll see how they evolve going forward. And I think that we'll also be able to evaluate McCord better. But if your offensive line is struggling, you might have to go to Devin Brown a little bit more because he's more mobile. So I saw some throws that when McCord made him, I was kind of like, okay, that's why he's the starting quarterback. But still, the offensive line remains a question mark. I think Quinn Ewers is interesting because, he was up and down. I think we'll find out a lot more about him this weekend. I'm with you on Jordan Travis. Like the second half was the first half performance. There was some shaky moments. I'm like, this is not the Jordan Travis that we're used to seeing. And we had talked all off season and we hyped him up as a potential Heisman candidate. But that second half Jordan Travis is the Jordan Travis I thought we would see in the first half. But just the way that he played in the second half, to your point, I think one of the better week one performances by anyone outside of Colorado.
I'm still putting it ahead of Colorado because TCU, oh my God, talking about a quarterback who did not pass the test, although it wasn't necessarily his fault, as the linebacker there, Hodges, pointed out. We'll get to TCU in a second. Quick note also, if you go, and again, quarterback rating is what it is. I'm not suggesting that it is a good metric, a perfect metric, but if you just sort every quarterback so far in college football based on quarterback rating, and I have a larger question I want to ask you about this. The top 19, and this is a long list, so just bear with me here real quickly, and I'm going to rattle this off, so try to keep up. Michael Pratt, Emory Jones, Jackson Dart, Caleb Williams, Connor Wigman, Dylan Gabriel, Casey Thompson, okay, Sam Hartman, Jalen Milroe, Garrett Schrader, Bo Nix, KJ Jefferson, Michael Penix, Jaden DeLara, Jordan Travis, Drew Allar, Deion Sanders, DJ Uiagalelei, JJ McCarthy. That is the top 19 rated quarterbacks after week 1. That is, every one of those guys is basically a superstar. You got Allar in there. The 2 transfers in Emory Jones and Casey Thompson, I believe, were 4-star recruits coming out of high school at bigger schools. Florida and Texas, I think, were their first schools. But like, look at the performances of the best quarterbacks in college football. Almost all of them delivered. Again, the names we did not mention: Kyle McCord, Quinn Ewers. There's a handful of other ones. Certainly Cade Klubnik. And if you go all the way to the bottom of all the qualified quarterbacks from week number 1 that are in the quarterback ranking, second to last, 99th, Cade Klubnik. So the Dabo Swinney anti-portal, anti-evolution, Garrett Riley offense, not off to a great start. So we'll get to more of that. But that's my first point, was just quarterback play. A lot of guys proved themselves, I thought, in week number 1, some of whom did so in very difficult situations. And a couple of guys still have a lot of questions to go in that regard. So that's my first point. My second point in our 2-point conversion or conversation. See, I already screwed up. The Big 12, man. I went back and listened to our pod last week. We warned, I warned that I'm not buying into the Texas Tech bandwagon yet. I need to see it. And sure enough, they go up to Wyoming. They get beat. We already talked about West Virginia. TCU, man, I cannot remember a harder fall from undefeated regular season, losing in the conference championship game. Yes, they got the win over Michigan in there, which is a huge victory for the organization to get to a national championship game. But then a 60-point blowout. Then you lose at home as a 21-point favorite to Colorado. The fall from grace for TCU has been like stark and rapid. And again, when you have linebackers coming out, leaders of the team saying we're a laughing stock right now, that's not a good place. Although I do like him saying that, like, let's set a bench, let's set a marker in the public eye here and say, look, we need to be better. Baylor, the first ever Power 5 win by Texas State, a 4-touchdown underdog at home. Like, what are we doing? I mean, I know TJ Finley's the quarterback, but the Big 12 to me, while the new schools went undefeated and looked pretty good, all 4 of them, Houston probably with the best win.
BYU a little shaky against
that's true.
Houston.
That's true. They need to score more points. That's a good point. But they went 4-0. The new schools went 4-0, and then you have 28-point upset by Baylor, 21-point upset by TCU, and a 14 to 15-point upset by Texas Tech. Obviously, West Virginia was a heavy underdog, but like not a good start for the Big 12. So
Oklahoma State also, like, 27-13 against Central Arkansas. That was kind of curious to me. No, I think your broader point is, like, it wasn't a good weekend for the Big 12. I think just optimistically, if you're looking at Texas Tech, like, if you miss field goals and if you convert a missed field goal or 2, you probably leave Wyoming with a close win instead of the loss. So it's not all bad for Texas Tech. I think Baylor, just zooming out to the bigger picture, last season, a disappointing year after winning the Big 12, and now another loss to start the season against Texas State. So I think kind of wondering where Baylor and Dave Aranda is gonna be a question for me. And they get Utah this week, so we may get a much better idea early in the season of where this team is.
Well, that's what I'm going to say is, like, all these teams now are on the ropes. Like, Texas Tech hosts Oregon. Like, that's a big, I mean, Oregon's the favorite, of course. Oklahoma State hosts Arizona State. They're a slight favorite in that one. Future conference rivals. Baylor hosts Utah, as you mentioned, as a more than a touchdown underdog at home. Future conference rivals. So, like, all these teams have work to do right away. Like, Texas, of course, didn't look elite against Rice. It was fine. They didn't look perfect against Rice, and they've got to go to Bama now. So, like, this we'll get to a little bit more of those games, but, like, the Big 12, not only did you slip up in week 1, but there's a chance it could continue in week number 2. So those are my 2 points of conversation coming out of week number 1.
My first point coming out of week number 1 is what a great weekend it was for the Pac-12. Undefeated, not to mention just the high-level quarterback play like we talked about. It was DJ, Caleb Williams has been great the first 2 weeks of the season. Deion Sanders in Colorado. That's kind of my within the Pac-12 conversation, I really wanted to talk about Colorado because they are the most interesting team in the country to me, with Coach Prime and the way they built this roster. Don't want to overreact to just one game, but that performance and going on the road and getting the win was more than I would have anticipated back in the offseason. You know, their win total was 3.5, and some people had them at 4. I mean, for a team that had as many transfers as they had and to look as good as they did, I thought they were well coached. Sean Lewis, an offensive coordinator, the offensive line looked better than I thought. You know, there are some questions they're going to have to address going forward in terms of just roster depth. We'll see how defense and offensive line evolve. But for a Colorado team that had that many new faces, we wanted to know what Coach Prime's team would look like. Well, they passed the test in week 1. We may find out TCU is not as good as we think. That's okay. I thought Colorado was just impressive. And also Travis Hunter playing about 200 snaps in 90-degree weather was also just insanity. So.
Yeah, 129 snaps for Travis Hunter, a true two-way star that at Colorado is a much bigger platform for him. I'm very torn on Colorado, so maybe I need your help and maybe the audience's help. Like I find it very easy to get up for the players and to get up for the games and the storylines. And Steven, you were basically saying like this could be one of the worst teams in Power 5. Well, that's obviously not going to be true. And listen, I'm not throwing you under the bus there because I agreed with you, but it's like the Prime thing is just hard to root for. Like, and maybe this is a me problem. Maybe this is like a grumpy old man thing because I don't like how he left I don't like how he left Jackson State. I don't like how he treated the HBCUs. Now he's like ripping on Florida State as an alumni. Like he's like, no, I'm not an alumni of Florida State. I'm like, he's been very combative with media for no reason at all. Like he's just kind of acting like a tool bag sometimes. And like, it's not that I'm not interested in what he's doing. I'm very interested in what he's doing to see if it works, to see if the wholesale changes work, to see if the personality driven head coach that has never been done. This is unprecedented territory. So I'm fascinated with how it works out. I love watching Hunter and Sanders and all these guys play ball, but it's hard for me to be as obsessed with the storyline because Coach Prime makes it hard. It's like Dabo. Dabo makes it hard to root for Clemson. Like Clemson has elite uniforms, elite fans, elite logo. The colors are great. The stadium atmosphere is great. The whole thing is great. And it's hard. They are not a likable team because of Dabo. And I wonder if if the shtick and the whole thing, like, are we going to be this obsessed with Colorado all the time? Or is it just like, does that make sense? I'm on a therapy couch here, I guess.
It does, because I wonder what happens when Colorado loses a game. I think if you're an average college football fan, I think it's a fascinating story. I find Colorado like easy to root for. Like I know I'm a little bit higher on Prime than you are. I think I've been buying into the roster overhaul, him being the CEO, hiring good assistants, bringing in transfers. Like the roster talent this year to last year is like significantly better. The question for me was like, how do you blend all this together in like 6 months? Well, they've done a great job. I mean, Saturday they looked like a well-coached team. I find them easy to root for now. I wonder what happens if the losses start to pile up, and then, I mean, like you said, he seemed a little combative after the game. He was keeping the receipts. That's also just Deion Sanders too. Like that's just who he is. So it's just, I don't necessarily mind it, but when you lose, you have to
people are gonna pile on. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you also have to be able to, if you can dish it out, you have to be able to take it too.
No, that's a really good point. That's exactly the right thing to say. Like, and again, I'm not like necessarily not high on him finding success. I'm not like, I can separate my objective opinion of where the football team's going to go with like, I don't like how he's doing it. I don't like removing scholarships and kicking 40 people off a roster. Like, I know why he did it, but cynically, I don't have to like that. I don't have to like how he treated the HBCUs or how he treated Jackson State or how he left or why he left or what he said or how he treats other people in the media, or like, I don't have to like any of the shtick at all. Like, I don't have to. I do think I wonder how much it wears thin quickly, but you're right. Like to the victor go the spoils. And if you win, you can talk that ish, as they say. And if you lose, you better be able to take it. Cause I'm willing to bet you like I'm willing to be a little bit more, I don't know, accepting of it all, even if I don't like it. I'm not gonna, I don't go in on people except for Urban Meyer, and and so I could see some like older, stodgier, traditional media folk in our college football world really, really going in on hard on him if he loses some games, and maybe that's not fair. So
It's also,
anyway,
I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you view it, this is how you have to remake rosters right
yeah,
now in college football. Like the rules are what they are. You can run
I don't know.
players off. You
Eh.
can dip into the portal as much as you need. You can sign up to 85 now. So, I mean,
Yeah.
he's taking advantage of the rules, much like Lincoln Riley, much like all the other ones have done with roster overhauls.
All right, last point, and then I'll let you get to your second point. But that is, people hated Jim Harbaugh because he was overexposed, right? Like he got so much
Yeah.
coverage, he was doing all this stuff, he got overexposed. That could be like the amount of TV exposure that he gets, and maybe it's because people just love him, but I don't know. It'll be fascinating to watch. Like it's utterly, I mean, either way, win or lose, good or bad, up or down, it's all very, very interesting. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think just watch Fox in the promos. I mean, there's Coach Prime
Everywhere.
riding Ralphie on the promos. I mean, it was
Unbelievable.
TCU Colorado, the biggest game of the century or whatever.
That
So
turned out to be pretty
yeah,
good. So.
it did. I guess we have to give Fox credit. They got it right.
Yeah.
My second point for this week is talking about teams that need to panic, not hit the panic button. I'm going to throw a couple out there, and I want to get your opinion on this. I'm not concerned about Clemson or LSU yet. I think I would characterize it as growing, but not hitting the panic button. Would you agree with that?
Definitely not panicking for LSU. I think everything is in front of them. Clemson, maybe a little more panicky, but I tend to agree with you that they're going to win a lot of games they play. All the games they've lost have been to good teams, and the loss to Duke was not fluky at all. They got beat. But, when you get 5 trips inside the 10, normally you're going to score more than like one field goal or whatever. So it was not, does that make sense? It's not fluky, but like also it's statistically improbable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. 1.2 points per scoring opportunity for Clemson on Monday night. You mentioned it, just missed opportunities there. So there are some things I think they can clean up. But I also think what's raising my concern level is when you look at Cade Klubnik's numbers, 4.9 yards per attempt, 27 completions for 209 yards. We talked about it all off season. Like, where are the receivers? Like, where's the DeAndre Hopkins, Justin Ross? Like, where's the go-to guy of this group? That's still a question mark after week 1. But also, too, I think just watching that game, Duke wasn't like out of its league in terms of like these two teams looked a lot more even than I thought they would going into that game. So I think rising level of concern for Clemson, but not there yet. I kind of put Nebraska in that same territory of rising, but not like panic level yet, because it is Matt Rule's first year. But I think you look at the way the schedule sets up, they still have to play a lot of toss-up games in the Big Ten West. They had a winnable game on Thursday night, another close loss. And now you get a Colorado team that's much better than we think. So I should have included Nebraska in the first two. I do think there are 3 teams that I would be hitting the. Go ahead.
I'm going to add Nebraska to my panic list because of like, I believe in Matt Rule. So this is not a long-term indictment of the Nebraska decision. To me, this is about, there's no athletes there. And not only was it one of the ugliest football games you're going to see, but like Minnesota, nice win. They did not look nearly as productive as we expected. I mean, basically 3 points, and without those 2 turnovers, they would have been completely shut down. But Jeff Sims looked terrible. Like, you can't throw red zone interceptions in the final 5 minutes, fumbling the football. Like, they don't look like they have any athletes. And I know he's got to make over the roster, but you just got done talking about how you do it. And people are doing it all over the country. Nebraska has no dudes. I was alarmed at how unathletic they looked in that situation against another team that is not exactly the most athletic in the world in Minnesota. So I'm panicking on Nebraska, and I'm going to put them in the boat with the teams you're about to mention.
I think the alarming thing was about Nebraska was kind of what you mentioned, is that it felt like if Jeff Sims didn't run and if there wasn't like a completion like way downfield, then the offense was just bogged down. Like it didn't feel like it was basically Jeff Sims or all or nothing on him. And that's not going to work the rest of the year. But they get Colorado this week, so things could change quickly. The three teams that I am panicking on after this week, I think Florida, South Carolina, and Baylor. I think we talked about Baylor, the loss to Texas State, sort of continuing what we saw last season. For South Carolina, the offensive line is a major issue. All offseason, it was Dow Loggins and how Spencer Rattler are going to work together, but it's the line of scrimmage that's going to make or break this team. I thought Spencer Rattler was fine. I don't think he's considered against North Carolina. He just didn't have much time to throw. And I think for Florida, it's just when you look at the team that we saw on Thursday night is going to be one that really struggles to get to a bowl game already. And you can't have those small errors like special teams penalties, silly turnovers, mistakes like that. So I don't see Florida having a very big margin for error here. And what we saw on Thursday night's not going to be good enough to get them to 6 wins.
Yeah, I'm panicking on South Carolina as well because of how difficult the schedule is and because I don't think you can fix offensive line issues generally in the course of the season. It's not like all of a sudden guys develop and turn into stars or like you can find a 4th string running back who knows how to pick up some yards. Like offensive lines are generally very difficult to fix. And while it was not Spencer Rattler's fault, they got stops. South Carolina actually got stops. Now, to be very fair, North Carolina defensively looked much improved. Drake May looked every bit the part of a number 1 overall pick. By the way, Riley Leonard, same thing in the Duke game. While he wasn't exactly perfect throwing the football every time, he basically played a very good football, a near perfect football game, and obviously had an extraordinary play down the sideline to give them a bigger lead. But they got 2 interceptions and forced 2 punts after going down 31. South Carolina did after going down 31-17. Like they got stops. They had opportunities to get into the game with short fields. And while Rattler was 30 of 39 for over 350, like what good was it? Like I know the offensive line was a much bigger concern. There's no question. But like Rattler wasn't exactly like they had 8 possessions down the stretch to try to score and tie the game. Like I think they had their first 4 possessions where the game was kind of going back and forth. And then they basically just didn't score on 8 straight possessions. North Carolina, I don't care how bad your offensive line is. North Carolina's defense should not hold you to 8 straight possessions without points. Or I think there might have been 1 field goal in there, basically. So
that was a totally
I'm
different North Carolina defense than we've seen in the last 2 years. I mean, maybe all those high touted recruits that they have on the defensive line, some of the transfers they brought in, maybe it's all clicking this year.
And then I'm with you on Baylor, and Blake Shapen might be a little banged up as well. So keep an eye on the knee there, I believe, for Blake Shapen.
Yeah, he's out this week against Utah. So it'll be Sawyer Robertson getting the start.
Yep, there you go. Okay, that's our 2-point conversation from week number 1. Looking ahead, some of those storylines affect the whole season. Again, I'm panicking for Nebraska for this season, not long term, but just for this season because of how poor it looked.